America will do the right thing. It will pay down its debt. It will pay the principal and the interest on time in full. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, American governments never intended to pay down its debt. Their plan was always to borrow, borrow more, and borrow again. America will cheat. It's preparing to screw up its own people and the rest of the world. How is it going to happen? Let's talk. The US public debt hit $36 trillion. It goes up by $1 trillion every 100 days. It's over $100,000 per person if you live in the States. If you're an American, you owe over $100,000. And the interest payments hit $1 trillion per year. It takes $1 trillion just to serve the debt, not to reduce it, God forbid, but just to serve the debt, to send the American money to Japan and China. The US public debt is unsustainable. It can't and will not go on. So, how to reduce a public debt? There are three ways of reducing public debt: to raise taxes, to reduce public spending, and to print dollars, to inflate this debt away. But there is one more solution, one more way of paying down the US public debt. This solution is the most painful, most disturbing, most dangerous, and most likely. But before I tell you about this, I need to explain why the previous three solutions won't work. So bear with me for 5 minutes and I will tell you the most disturbing and most likely way of erasing the US public debt. The first one and the second one are classic solutions, the textbook solutions of how a good government should deal with the public debt. And it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because the US presidents don't raise taxes. Presidents Bush, Obama, and Trump, they all cut taxes. Cutting taxes, it's like the only solution to any problem of the US economy. If the US economy is bad, cut taxes. If the US economy is good, cut taxes again. In 2001, the US economy was hit by a recession and President George W. Bush cut taxes. Then, 2 years later, the US economy recovered. It was booming and President George W. Bush cut taxes again. But President Bush made his tax cuts valid only until 2010. And in 2010, President Obama could have just let them expire. All he had to do is to do nothing. But Obama jumped to the action. He negotiated a deal and he made Bush tax cuts permanent. President Obama was more like Bush than Bush ever was. And then in 2018, President Trump cut taxes again, even though nobody asked him to. That was about raising taxes. The US will not do it. But if the US won't raise taxes, can it reduce government spending? No. The two biggest categories of the government spending is defense and health care. And America can't reduce its defense spending. So can it reduce its healthcare spending? No, the US healthcare is famously expensive and wasteful. Healthcare is second to Tuvalu, population 11,000. So with these two black holes of government spending, defense and healthcare, the US can't reduce its spending. So we can forget about two good solutions, two textbook solutions to the public debt crisis. America can't and won't raise taxes or reduce public spending. And that leaves us with the third solution, the bad solution. Just print dollars. Just inflate the debt away. You want America to pay down its debt? It will. But it will pay down its debt with the useless, worthless dollars. And the US government is already doing it. President Biden, the president with the biggest popular vote, boosted public spending and led America to the 40-year high in inflation. To achieve the 40-year record in inflation, that's quite an accomplishment. The US is already inflating its debt, and the US dollar is not what it used to be. But it wasn't enough. Yes, the US inflated a lot of its debt. Yes, inflation was high all the way to 9%. But to really inflate its debt away, America would need a Venezuela-like inflation. And the US government can't do it, not yet. And to make things worse, the US Federal Reserve took action. It started reducing inflation. Jerome Powell, the chair of the US Federal Reserve, didn't want to reduce inflation. He wanted to please Biden. If Joe Biden was printing money, Jerome Powell was fine with that. But then something happened. It's called economics. Because the only job of a central bank is to control inflation. So Jerome Powell waited as much as he could, but eventually, reluctantly, he had to start doing something. He started raising the policy rate and reducing money supply. So the economic situation in the US still is really weird. When the US government is trying to spend as much as possible, spending for everything, sending money to everyone, the US Federal Reserve was cutting the money supply, reducing inflation, canceling out the actions of the Biden administration, which means that the US can't inflate its debt away. It needs a different solution, a different way of raising the public debt. And that leaves the US with the only solution. The United States will wipe it out. America will forgive itself its own debt. It will screw the whole world up. But hey, don't take it from me. Take it from President Donald Trump.
Who knows, maybe we'll pay off our $35 trillion, hand him a little crypto check, right? We'll hand him a little Bitcoin and wipe out our $35 trillion.
But how do you...
Wherever you think of Trump, you must give it to him that Trump is very honest. He tells you honestly that the US government will cheat, that to pay down its debt, the government will write a made-up check in fake currency. By the way, why Bitcoin? Bitcoin versus US dollar? You can use Bitcoin anywhere in the world, and you can't use US dollar in whole range of countries. If you have an account with Bitcoins, it means you have Bitcoins. If you have an account with US dollars, it can be frozen, sanctioned, arrested for the politics of the day. The quantity of Bitcoins is fixed, and the supply of US dollars is exploding when the US Federal Reserve keeps printing money. So I'm not so sure that the Bitcoin is a good candidate for wiping out the US public debt. But let's look not at the letter, but at the spirit of Donald Trump's promise. This is how it will likely work. First, the US will appoint an enemy of the day. And there are so many candidates. Then, the US will carefully prepare an emergency. Then it will use that emergency to erase the public debt. And then it will blame the enemy of the day. The US public debt gone. For such an emergency, the US can use a power failure, a brand new pandemic, a cyber attack, an alien invasion, wherever it takes to wipe out the debt. I know what you want to say. The US government will never do such a horrible thing. The US government is wonderful. The Joe Biden administration was beautiful, and the Trump administration will be even better. But seriously, there are no other options. When the US public debt grows by 10% a year, and the US economy grows by 1%, it's mathematically impossible to ever pay down the public debt. When America can't raise taxes, can't cut spending, and can't grow its economy. The only option is to erase the debt altogether, to engineer a fake emergency and to wipe out its debt. But what will it mean for you? It will mean that your money will disappear. Because most of our money is not banknotes in your pocket, it's not dollars in your wallet. These take a tiny, teeny fraction of the money supply, about 7%. But most of our money is bank deposits. Most of our money is digital, easily hacked, easily destroyed by the push of the button. And the US government will push that button. So think how well you are prepared for the upcoming financial Armageddon. When America cancels its debt, when your money disappears, will you have cash in your pocket? Will you have real assets like gold, land, or real estate? Will you survive? Now, when will it happen? It will happen when America will have no choice. When America will try to borrow, will try to sell its bonds, and no one will buy them. Right now, the biggest holders of the US public debt is Japan and China. And China is selling off US bonds. China is dumping US treasuries. And the reason is President Trump started a trade war with China. And President Biden slapped 1 million of sanctions on China. And President Trump will most likely continue Biden's policy of sanctioning China. So for China, it's a matter of survival to dump US bonds. And sooner or later, China will get rid of American bonds. China will stop funding American spending. And when it happens, when there is no buyer for American bonds, America will have no choice but to wipe out its debt. I don't think it will happen under President Trump. I think that the situation is not bad enough and it will take time for China to get rid of its bonds. So Donald Trump will be able to kick the can down the road and let the next president deal with the problem. So let's say in the next 10 years there is a good chance for a debt wipe out, a good chance for a financial Armageddon. That will mean the end of the US dollar as the reserve currency, the end of the US economic dominance, but also a new start. The US economy will get a chance to start anew, debt-free from a clean slate. Do you agree with Donald Trump's plan? Do you think that one day a US president will actually do it? Put your comment below. Thank you for watching and I'll talk to you next time.